So I would like to begin our meeting as it is currently, well, it's 6:30 here in Canada, and I'm sure it's whatever relevant time where everyone else is. So thank you, everyone, and I apologize for interrupting the testing, but I do note that we have a heavy day ahead of us, and so I would like to begin. I have done a quick review of active users, and I note that we do have our quorum, so we are ready with the members of the committee. I wish to recognize that we are rather behind where I had hoped to be at this time. So I did make some adjustments to the working program. In particular, as stated yesterday, we will start with documents 15, 7, and 28. I did want to make sure that the committee had a bit of time to consider what the path forward between now and the COP looks like. And then we will take up document 24 on tortoises and freshwater turtles from Madagascar, and I understand our colleagues from Madagascar are ready to provide their report. After which we will proceed with the remaining elements on our agenda, 19 through to 26. It's my hope that we will be able to complete our agenda. However, if we are unable to, I do have some thoughts about how we can move ahead, as we will not have extra time. I want to note that it is my goal to ensure that everyone here has the opportunity to be heard. I've learned some lessons on working in a virtual platform. I recognize that what might take a certain amount of time in a face-to-face takes a little bit longer, but I do feel we've had some good successes. We've moved some items forwards, and I hope I have had the opportunity to give everyone who wished to speak the chance to do so. However, you could help me as well in your interventions if you could focus specifically on the decision or in the document at hand and provide your succinct comments and advice as you have been doing so, and take the floor only if your view has not yet been expressed. I do appreciate your help with this so that we can try to ensure we meet our ambitious goal for today. And in that regard, before I turn to the first item on today's agenda, I do want to take note of one missing piece from item 18. So we closed our meeting yesterday discussing the report of the Working Group on Electronic Systems and Information Technologies. It's been drawn to my attention that one of our colleagues, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, was unable to make their intervention due to connectivity issues, and they provided their intervention electronically. And so, as I have indicated that only interventions that are read, or either read by myself or read by the intervener, will be in the record, I will take a moment to read out the intervention that the DRC provided so that it can be included in the record of our discussion related to electronic systems. And apologies for my French. La grande gestion de la République démocratique du Congo a voulu...
The delegation, as I'm taking the floor for the first time, the Democratic Republic of Congo would like to congratulate the Secretariat for having organized this virtual Standing Committee meeting on CUDO under exceptional circumstances. The DRC would also like to congratulate the chair of the Standing Committee, who thanks them, for her skilled chairing of our meeting, and would like to ensure her of full cooperation. We would also like to congratulate Switzerland for having prepared document 18 as a chair of the Working Group on Electronic Systems and Information Technologies. The DRC would like to thank the CITES Secretariat and the World Customs Organization for having organized the International Workshop on Modern Customs Systems for better management of CITES protected species. This workshop was held at the end of 2020. The workshop gave the DRC the opportunity to provide a presentation on their e-system, which has been in force since June of 2020. Thanks to financial support from the European Union, support to CITES trees, for which we would like to thank the EU. This platform, the CITES Management Information System, allows the DRC to grant permits and certificates with a QR code, which ensures that these documents are secure. This allows us to reduce fraud and to verify the authenticity of permits and certificates, and to monitor export quotas to ensure that they are not exceeded, and to also ensure that we have full control over online certificates. This helps us to ensure the improved implementation of CITES in the DRC. The DRC would like to take this opportunity to express its support for the conclusions in Document 18 and would like to participate in the working group in question. We have noted that there are no French-speaking African countries represented in the working group.
My attention, as I've noted, it is important that interventions that are in the record are read into the record, and so when you have a connection problem, I am certainly happy to do that, and I apologize for missing this one. And with respect to the working group, as it is a working group that is already formed, I invite you to contact the chair of the working group with your request to join. So thank you for that. And with that, I will now turn the committee's attention to document 15. So I will ask the Secretariat to provide a brief introduction to this document so that we can begin our discussions. Secretariat, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all. In this document, the Secretariat is summarizing the practical implications of the COVID-19 pandemic on the implementation of the Convention, specifically on national CITES authorities, the Standing Committee, the Animals Committee, the Plants Committee, and the Secretariat. I am referring to document 15. The document gathers together in one place a summary of the intersessional actions undertaken by the Standing Committee, the Animals Committee, and the Plants Committee since the pandemic sanitary measures were put in place. The SC, AC, and PC members have been very active and very responsive during this enforced break, and again, the Secretariat thanks and congratulates all the members for their efforts. The document presents some of the lessons that we believe have been learned in the process. A first draft of this document was posted on the CITES website in January 2021 for review, and the Secretariat thanks all the parties and observers who provided their comments. We've also issued a questionnaire for parties about their experiences in implementing the Convention during the COVID-19 pandemic. We thank all respondents, and after analysis, we will use your inputs going forward. Based on this review and the comments we have received, the Secretariat intends to make some proposals to COP19 to enable the Convention to better prepare for unexpected events in future. We have set out the issues that we intend to address in these proposals to COP19 in paragraph 32. But in order to ensure that the document presented to COP19 forms a good basis for further discussions, the Secretariat would very much appreciate receiving comments on its scope and objectives. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. So we have before us a document where the Secretariat is seeking our advice on issues that they plan to bring to the COP in terms of lessons learned from situations like the current COVID situation. So I will first open the floor to any comments or advice that the members of the Standing Committee wish to offer. I see an intervention from Israel to be followed by Indonesia. Israel, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We applaud the Secretariat's initiative on this important issue. We note also the closely related topic identified in the notification to the parties 2021/031, also related to this topic. This involves the establishment of an intersessional working group mandated to review the nexus between international wildlife trade and zoonotic diseases. This notification was posted on the 8th of April, 2021. 4 days later, on the 12th of April, 2021, the World Health Organization, World Organization for Animal Health, and the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, supported by the Food and Agriculture Organization, jointly issued formal guidance, a document calling, quote, reducing the public health risk associated with the sale of live wild animals of mammalian species in traditional food markets, end quote. The very first action recommended by this formal guidance by UN agencies says, quote, WHO, OIE, and UNEP call on national competent authorities to suspend trade in live-caught wild animals of mammalian species for food or breeding purposes and close sections of food markets selling live-caught wild animals of mammalian species as an emergency measure unless demonstrable effective regulations and adequate risk assessments are in place, end quote. Madam Chair, the linkage between these markets and the pandemic has been persuasively documented many times. And I've seen with my own eyes that some of these markets have been selling CITES listed species. And some of these markets acquire those animals internationally. How else can an African rock python end up in an Asian wet market? CITES should be concerned about this. Some UN agencies have been convinced to act and have issued formal guidance calling for the suspension of some trade and the closure of parts of some markets. They are targeting the most conspicuous health hazards. It is well and good for CITES to create a working group to look into this matter, but this is a process that will take a long time. We think CITES should start doing something right now. CITES is the sole UN agency with global authority to regulate wildlife trade. CITES has direct and immediate contact with wildlife law enforcement agencies in nearly every country. CITES has the stature and credibility that parties respect. To start, we ask that our Standing Committee colleagues join us in asking the Secretariat to issue a new notification to the parties, informing parties of the recent formal guidance document issued by WHO, OIC, and UNEP with concurrence of FAO, and encouraging all parties to CITES to welcome and implement the terms of this guidance with urgency Thousands of people have been dying of this pandemic every day. The Secretary General of the United Nations has called for a comprehensive response to COVID-19. CITES should be part of that comprehensive response. We need to help shutting down the highest risk sources where contagious disease emerges and are communicated to human society. At a minimum, let us simply ask parties to follow the good advice of UN experts. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Israel. Thank you for your comments. I note the subject of your comments is, as you noted, a point to be raised in the working group that is currently being formed. I believe the deadline for expressions of interest have passed, and now it is up to myself to form that working group, ensuring that it meets the rules of procedure. And so I intend to do so rapidly. I am happy that the Standing Committee has agreed. I think the Standing Committee has indicated their desire to address some of the issues you've raised through the formation of that working group. However, I note the points you raise are not the points on the agenda itself. The Secretariat is seeking advice on actions that it's going to propose to the COP regarding dealing with sort of emergency situations like the ones we find within. So I take good note of your comments, and I certainly hope that they will again be raised during the discussions of the working group. But given the limited time and the heavy agenda we have here, I would like to focus our discussion today on the substance of the document provided by the Secretariat. So thank you, Israel. I will now turn to my next interveners. So I have Indonesia, followed by Gabon, Indonesia, followed by Canada, and then Peru. Indonesia, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Indonesia really appreciates Secretariat's initiative and hard work in preparing document 15. We agreed to mandate the Secretariat to prepare recommendations on the Convention's better preparation to cope with unexpected events for the consideration for COP19. Having said that, we would like to underline 3 points. Firstly, regarding Secretariat's proposal to review the allocation of trust funds to allow greater financial flexibility for unplanned situations, Indonesia is of the view that the Standing Committee should be consulted first if there is a necessity to change or reallocate budget to deal with unexpected situations such as the current COVID-19 pandemic. By doing so, we can assure transparency and accountability on the use of trust fund. Secondly, regarding the possibility of hybrid meeting in Geneva in the future, as suggested by the Secretariat in the document, Indonesia actually has no problem with this idea because we have a diplomatic presence in Geneva and has one or more Geneva-based diplomats dealing with environmental issues, including CITES. However, we have to take into consideration the fact that not all parties have permanent mission in Geneva. Moreover, several permanent missions in Geneva may not have environmental experts. That will make a hybrid meeting challenging for some parties. And last but not least, Indonesia requests the Secretariat to give a more comprehensive information and estimation on the budget implication of some potential expenses, such as the need for insurance to cover the cost of canceling meetings at short notice, and how such expense will add to each party's contribution to trust fund. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Indonesia, and I'm sure we've taken good note of that was advice to the Secretariat. So next on my list was Canada, followed by Peru, and then Poland. Canada, please.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair. Canada is speaking on behalf of the North American region. The region appreciates and can support the work of the Secretariat to develop mechanisms to respond to unforeseen events that affect meeting function. We recognize the challenges with virtual platforms, and as we have experienced at this meeting, which can impact our ability to make complex decisions in a transparent and inclusive manner. The North American region would like to propose that recommendations C and recommendation D from the Secretariat be qualified by adding "in case of emergencies" and "when in-person meetings are not possible." While the region appreciates the importance for this contingency planning, we would not support moving to a hybrid format under regular circumstances. The value of gaining trust and respect through informal in-person interactions between sessions cannot be overlooked and should be encouraged whenever possible. In unforeseen circumstances such as the current COVID-19 pandemic, virtual platforms provide an alternative mechanism for ensuring we can advance key priorities, which we are doing now. Nonetheless, their use should be on an exceptional basis, recognizing the multiple additional benefits in-person discussions provide. Additionally, electronic permit issuance has slowed down during the pandemic, and the region would appreciate discussions related increasing efficiency of permit issuance by parties. Finally, on behalf of Canada, I would just like to address briefly the intervention by Israel. Canada really appreciates the points and the importance of CITES to look into the role that the convention may have pertaining zoonotic disease spread. And we would like to support the chair's view that this is a topic that we look forward to discussing in the context of that working group. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada. So I will turn to Peru, followed by Poland. And I also do invite now other observer parties to indicate their interest in intervening. So Peru, please, followed by Poland. From Peru, so while I invite the technicians to assist Peru, and I will turn now to Poland, followed by Maroc, and then hopefully we will turn back to our colleague from Peru. So Poland, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Poland wishes to thank the Secretariat for this thorough analysis for this meeting. We support the suggested scope of recommendations to be made to the COP19, and we welcome the efforts to make increasing use of online meeting facilities. At the same time, we'd also like to emphasize the need to ensure transparency and equal access, including by observer organizations. In this regard, we'd like to raise our concern over the idea of hybrid meetings. We believe that in order to limit the challenges connected with equal access, the future meetings should be either fully physical or fully virtual. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Poland. I see our colleague from Peru has returned, so I will take Peru, followed by Maroc, and then Gabon. So Peru, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Greetings, everyone. Speaking on behalf of our region, we would like to thank the Secretariat for their consideration of the difficulties that we have come up against in view of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we would like to thank the Secretariat as well as the committee chairs for the work done to ensure that we can meet our objectives under these circumstances. We welcome the recommendations that have been prepared for the COP. We have a suggestion that we deal with other issues of substance. We need to ensure that we have studies carried out to see exactly how our work is affected. And we would agree also with the views expressed by Israel. We are dealing with the problems that everyone is facing. That is to say, this pandemic is partly due to the fact that there is very little monitoring of these wet markets. We feel that it would be useful to have the working group on this matter continue its work and focus, and that point be made in this document as well. Thank you.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam. First of all, we would like to thank the Secretariat for having drafted document 15. We would also like to take this opportunity to warmly congratulate the Secretariat for the excellent work done under difficult circumstances. Measures taken by parties to stop the virus have of course had an effect on CITES and its implementation. We have, however, been able to be in contact with colleagues in the region thanks to Secretariat support, and we have been able to work together to keep updated on future meetings, notably the 73rd meeting of the Standing Committee. We would like to thank the Secretariat for having prepared recommendations to help us deal with situations such as this one. There is some concern in our region, however, with respect to online meetings and transparency in decision making. We therefore feel that it would be useful to further clarify the recommendations to be made to the COP. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Morocco. So next on my list was Gabon. And as I mentioned, I do invite other parties who wish to speak to identify themselves now. Gabon will be followed by Senegal. So Gabon, please, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For over a year now, COVID-19 has caused upheaval in international meetings and has led to online meetings with great uncertainty as to in-person meetings. CITES has been dealing with this problem like others by holding online meetings in order to move forward. We would like to thank the Secretariat for all of the work done in this respect. In the face of future zoonoses or other disasters, it would be useful for the Secretariat to prepare measures to deal with such problems. It would seem that most parties prefer in-person meetings, but it seems good to have the option of online meetings if necessary. We do feel that we would agree with Canada that in-person meetings do provide good opportunities for other sorts of meetings, but we would like to express our support for the recommendations in paragraphs 31 to 33 of document 15. We would stress, however, that we need to ensure that all these procedures enjoy transparency, quorum, and clear decision-making systems. In conclusion, we would like to take up the point made by Israel with respect to zoonoses and the international trade in wildlife, fauna and flora. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Gabon. So I am going to close my list to parties so that I can take one or two interventions from observers. So I will indicate that in my list for parties, I have quite a list now. I have Senegal. Senegal is going to be followed by Niger, Burkina Faso, Tanzania, Japan, and Chile. And so that will be it for parties from here. So please, Senegal, you have the floor. There appears to be an issue with Senegal, so I will ask the technicians to give a hand, and I will turn to Niger.
I wanted to speak under this item, so thank you, Madam Chair. It's clear that CITES, like other international treaties, has to adapt to the current situation, and Niger would like to say that we support the base of this document. Despite the situation, the work of the bodies of CITES has to continue. Nevertheless, the implementation of the procedures suggested need to ensure full transparency and the participation of all parties. Otherwise, the convention itself would be in danger. So we call that the measures envisaged do not limit the number of participants and do not disadvantage any participant. When we look at the lists of the documents and the list of participants must be made available. And we believe that the exceptional situations will justify looking once more at the measures, and we have concerns about equal access to vaccines. This is a document that we have sent yesterday by the head of the CITES authority. Thank you.
Thank you, Niger. And I do have quite a long list of countries, so I'll ask countries to indulge me in, if your points have been raised by previous speakers, to simply indicate your alignment. I will see if Senegal, perhaps Mamadou, might be able to provide the intervention from Senegal.
I shall speak now.
Bonjour.
Good day. Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. Senegal had technical problems because there are two of us on the platform, and I think my colleague Abba, who is the CITES focal point, was unable to connect, but we are working together. So I can summarize what he wanted to say, and I'd like to congratulate the Secretariat on the work that's been carried out, and meetings were cancelled or postponed, but the Secretariat has maintained a link with the party so we can progress with work. So we'd like to thank you, and we welcome the recommendations that have been made. And some recommendations have already been mentioned by parties, Gabon and other parties. Face-to-face meetings are really our priority, and online should be the exception. But we can't leave things without progressing. So At this point, Senegal would like to say it's important to have a balance between participation of parties and to ensure that we have transparency, and we'll see how the online meetings. CITES is a very large organization with many parties, and it can be complicated, and it depends on the technology available to all parties, and we need to really think about transparency. So the biggest challenge is if we cannot hold face-to-face meetings, to ensure that certain parties can participate and that others can follow online. We would also like to support Peru. We'd like to support Peru and Israel on the statements that they made. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senegal. I have next on my list is Burkina Faso, followed by Tanzania, Japan, and Chile. So Burkina Faso, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We support the position of Niger in that holding meetings in line can disadvantage disadvantage parties which have worse technological solutions. So it would be good to find a solution which will allow full transparent participation for these parties so that we can participate in the meetings even if they take place virtually. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I will turn to Tanzania, followed by Japan, and then Chile.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Tanzania will wish to align itself with community from Canada, especially at the recommendation C. Should be at the time for the pandemic only, not otherwise. Also, Tanzania wishes to express its concerns regarding the suggestion by Israel. It should be noted that at this time where countries which are affected by COVID-19 are fighting to stabilize their economy, the issue of trading live animal and other trophies has been seen as the strategy to allow the community to have their livelihood through the wildlife resources. So instituted the trade suspension for all live animal trade, I think will be an issue. It will hinder the effort by most of the countries in Africa which depends trading live animal in order to sustain the livelihood of its people. Also, we should take into consideration that we have thousands of migratory birds across the world and also animals crossing the common geographical borders. Therefore, instituting the trade suspension will not really control the spread of the disease, taking into account the connection between continents that has been brought by those migratory bird species. Lastly, Tanzania is humbly requested to be included in the working group in order to share the view from Tanzania as well as contributing to this document. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanzania, and the working group on zoonotics is being established via the online procedures, so I'll take a note of that, but there is, just to be clear, there is no working group on the current document. The current document is simply seeking the advice of parties to the Secretariat's proposals on elements they're going to bring forward to the Conference of the Parties. And thank you to all the parties who have already provided some of that advice. And I do take the point, of course, about the challenges and the concerns around the role of wildlife trade in the spread of zoonotic diseases, something that the working group that's being developed separately online is meant to address, and certainly something that, while I recognize is of high relevance, is not on our current agenda. And so I will continue with my list on document 15. I have and I will also at this point invite any observers who wish to intervene to identify themselves. So I may take one or two observers. I have Japan, followed by Chile.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I try to be brief. First, the review of the scheduling and inter-sessional decision-making procedures. Japan is flexible in that, but at the same time, it should not compromise in any way the ability and the opportunity for all stakeholders to meaningfully participate in the process. Second, the adjustment to the rule of procedure, including the online or hybrid meeting. Under the circumstances, we are flexible on that as well. However, of course, the fundamental principle of the intergovernmental or international process and procedure should be upheld to make a meaningful decision by the CITES. Thirdly, the review of the allocation of funds and so on. We support the idea of the greater flexibility and additional contingency measures. However, that should come with the greater transparency and accountability. And also, this should be done in good communication or in consultation as appropriate with the subcommittee on finance and the budget. Lastly, this is not the topic at hand, but since some delegation already mentioned that the working group on zoonotic diseases, my government expressed the reservation to that in light of the its mandate of CITES and other intergovernmental bodies undertaking the work already. However, since the working group has been established, we will participate in that to contribute in a meaningful way. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan. So I will turn to Chile, please.
Gracias, señora presidenta. ¿Me escucha?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I'd like to congratulate you on this document 15 and add to the comments made by those who have spoken before, in that the recommendation 32C should ensure that the adjustments are when it's an exceptional situation, such as this pandemic, because the recommendation has implications on the rules of procedure. Thank you.
Thank you, Chile. So I am noting the time. So I have 3 requests for the floor, and I will take these last 3 requests, and then I'm closing this item. So I noted that Kenya requested the floor, after which I will take IWMC and then Natural Resources Defense Council, and those will be my final 3 interventions. So Kenya, you have the floor.
and we align ourselves to the views expressed by Canada, I think on behalf of North America, Poland, Senegal, Japan, and Chile, and possibly others who have spoken along those lines. We acknowledge we are in unusual times and the challenges, and that the Secretariat has taken the lead in suggesting measures that may be make it possible for us as a convention to effectively undertake decision making. But the bottom line, the point that we want to emphasize, because I've already said we are aligning ourselves to those parties and others, is to emphasize on the need to promote effective participation and transparency in all the decision-making processes in the affairs of our convention. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Kenya. So I will now take my final two interventions. So IWMC, your brief intervention, followed by NRDC.
Chair, my first comments with respect to the document itself presented by the Secretariat, to align myself with the many speakers who have congratulated the excellent document by the Secretariat, considering the very difficult circumstances in which we live, full of uncertainties. These documents represent an excellent occasion for a way forward. My second point, Madam Chair, is if ever you do have a lack of time to finish your agenda, you could certainly blame it on those like Israel who have expressed themselves completely outside of the subject. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, IWMC. I am confident I can manage the agenda, ensuring that all speakers who wish to provide their views are heard, and I will ask us to continue to have a respect we normally do. Natural Resources Defense Council, please. Can we pass the floor to the Natural Resources Defense Council? Okay, there seems to be a technical problem, so perhaps while that is sorted, I'd note that I was going to give the floor to the Natural Resources Defense Council on this item. So once the technical issue is sorted, I will return to the Natural Resources Defense Council. In the interim, I will summarize what I've heard for the Secretariat to take forward. So the Standing Committee takes note of the document provided by the Secretariat, and I hear we've congratulate the Secretariat on their efforts to help us move forward in these unusual times. The Standing Committee has provided some advice to the Secretariat regarding the document they intend to submit to the Conference of the Parties. I note in particular concerns that when considering alternative or contingencies for particularly unusual circumstances, that these be considered as exceptional, given concerns with transparency, hybrid meetings, and so on. So the Secretariat's asked to take note of that. Also, the budgetary costs of some of the proposals, as Indonesia has related, so the Secretariat's invited to consider those, as well as considering what exceptional circumstances consequences are to operative work such as taking on field missions and studies. So thank you to the committee and to the participants for providing your views and comments on this document, which will help the Secretariat improve their submission to the Conference of the Parties. I will again remind us that while we are in a virtual setting, we are still among colleagues who all have important views to express, and I would like to respectfully ask that this we maintain that level of respect here to all of our colleagues. I am going to see now if maybe we've resolved the issue with the Natural Resources Defense Council. Okay. So I do keep that pending. In the interim, I think I will ask us to turn our attention to agenda item 7 and the report from the Secretariat on arrangements for the 19th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. I have not forgotten NRDC and their desire to provide an intervention for item 15, and once we resolve this issue, I will be happy to take that intervention. So please, Secretariat, in the interim, can you please introduce item 7?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As we have informed all parties and observers earlier, Costa Rica has sadly had to withdraw their offer to host COP19. As we are all aware, this is a very difficult time for all countries, also in terms of the social and economic impacts of the pandemic. The Secretariat has posted notification to the parties of 16 March 2021 to seek expressions of interest from another party or parties to host COP19 in the second half of 2022. Interested parties have been requested to contact the Secretariat as soon as possible and at the latest by 30 June 2021. However, we have not received any offers so far. This means that if no new host is forthcoming, COP19 could be held at the International Conference Center, or CICG, in Geneva, Switzerland. As you know, we always maintain backup dates just in case. And as you know, this is a smaller venue, so it would have to have restricted participation because of the capacity limitations. Currently, we have reserved dates from 9 to 21 July 2022. Of course, this may change because there are limits on when, for example, they put deadlines on when to sign contracts. If another client requests these dates and we are not able to sign the I'm not able to sign the reservation agreement by their deadline, another client may take those dates. On other preparatory matters, I would like to announce that thanks to the cooperation of the Standing Committee members, the selection panel that will review nominations for officers to serve at COP19 is complete except for the ex officio place for the next host country. The following members are part of the panel. Africa, with Ms. Eli Hamunyela of Namibia. Asia, which is the Standing Committee Vice Chair ex officio, with Mr. Wu Zhongzhe from China. Central and South America and the Caribbean, with Jose Julian Suazo Cervantes from Honduras. Europe, with Ms. Elke Malfait of Belgium. North America, the Standing Committee Chair ex officio, Ms. Carolina Cáceres, Canada. Oceania, with Ms. Sarah Bagnall, New Zealand. The Secretariat ex officio representative, the Secretary General, myself, and then as I mentioned, we will confirm later on the next host country ex officio. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat, for that report. I will open the floor to any questions or comments starting with members of the Standing Committee. And I will also invite parties who wish to comment to indicate a request for the floor. Finally, I will invite observers who wish to comment on the preparations for the 19th COP to indicate your request for the floor. Okay, seeing no requests for the floor, we take note of the report from the Secretariat on the arrangements for the 19th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. Before I turn to item 28, I will turn back to item 15 to see if we've resolved the technical problems with Natural Resources Defense Council. So if you are able to request the floor, please go ahead and do so. Okay, so Natural Resources Defense Council, let's see if the second time's lucky.
Yes, can you hear me? Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'm very sorry for the technical problems. It happens everywhere. Thank you, Chair. This intervention is on behalf of the Natural Resources Defense Council, Center for International Environmental Law, Fondation Franz Weber, Defenders of Wildlife, Sea Shepherd Legal, Species Survival Network, David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation, Four Paws International, Animal Advocacy Protection, Humane Society International, Eurogroup for Animals, Environmental Investigation Agency, and Pro Wildlife. Well, we want to support the statements made by Israel, Peru, Gabon, Senegal, Niger, and others in relation to document 15, and express our appreciation for the work of the parties, observers, and Secretariat in these unprecedented times. Throughout this pandemic, we are constantly reminded of the value of in-person interactions, both professionally and in our daily lives. It also underscores the global inequities that continue to plague our planet. CITES must not be a tool for exacerbating those inequities by moving forward with meeting formats that do not ensure full participation. We therefore urge the parties to oppose any in-person or hybrid CITES meetings until representatives and observers from all member countries have access to vaccinations and COVID-related travel restrictions are lifted. In addition, we urge the Secretariat and parties to examine ways to expand meaningful access for virtual meetings, with an understanding that the ultimate goal is to get back to the vibrant decision-making that results from our in-person meetings. We consider it particularly important that any amendments to the rules of procedure of the committees and intersessional decision-making procedures do not lead to loss of inclusion and transparency, but maintain or enhance it. Lastly, we ask that the exceptional circumstances referred to in Doc 15 and that might affect intersessional work be clearly and narrowly defined by the Secretariat in its report to COP19. We are concerned, for example, about the consequences of increasing use of postal votes and lack of transparency, and we urge the Standing Committee to publish the details of all postal votes. In our view, answering questions about equity and inclusion in the conduct of CITES meetings is not a one-off exercise, but something that should happen continuously. We look forward to working with parties, the Secretariat, and other observers to advance these goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you, NRDC. And I wrapped up our conclusions for document 15 previously, but thank you for your added contributions to the considerations. So I will now turn our attention to document 28. So this document has been prepared by the Secretariat, and I will invite the Secretariat to start with introducing this document, please. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Normally, fixing a date and venue of the next meeting of the Standing Committee is relatively simple, but we live in different times. Given this uncertain situation we continue to find ourselves in this document, the Secretariat presents a risk analysis for future meetings of the Standing Committee and suggests 3 different scenarios for Standing Committee 74. The first scenario is to hold a face-to-face meeting at the Center for International de Conférences, CICG in Geneva, Switzerland in September 2021. The second option, invite a party to host Standing Committee 74 or seek alternative facilities in Switzerland in late 2021 or early 2022. Or the third option, hold Standing Committee 74 in an online format in early 2022. The Secretariat fully understands that the preference of parties is to hold face-to-face meetings if possible. The Secretariat does not recommend, however, holding a physical meeting in September, given the high risks that cannot be addressed satisfactorily given the situation of continued variants in the world, lack of vaccines at the global level, etc. Therefore, for Standing Committee 74, the Secretariat is proposing to immediately invite a party to host Standing Committee 74 in late 2021, early 2022, and to seek facilities in Switzerland also in late 2021, early 2022. Presuming that a meeting facility can be located, and as we have mentioned, we have some difficulties with this because of our previous engagements of both CICG and the Palais des Nations, the United Nations headquarters in Vienna, United Nations headquarters in Geneva, we need to be able to keep looking for a meeting facility. A decision on whether or not to go ahead with such a meeting in late 2021, early 2022 would need to be taken by 15 September to be able to organize ourselves for a possible virtual meeting. If a face-to-face meeting in late 2020, early 2021 cannot be achieved, then the Secretariat recommends a fully online meeting in early 2022. Given the volume of work before the Standing Committee, such an online meeting would need to be held over a longer period of time than the meeting this week, especially with such a long agenda that we are looking forward to, and will doubtless require some items of the committee's work to be deferred to the next intersessional period between COP19 and COP20. The Standing Committee is invited to provide guidance to the Secretariat on the best way forward, using the scenarios and analysis if considered appropriate, and instruct the Secretariat to progress with planning going forward. Also, the Standing Committee is invited to take note of the table of tasks of the Standing Committee to COP19 with a status report on each provided in the table in Annex 1 of this document. The Secretariat suggests that, where appropriate, drafts of working documents for Standing Committee 74 be made available on the CITES website for comment by parties and observers, and they be revised in the light of comments received prior to being submitted for discussion at Standing Committee 74, as happened for some documents for Standing Committee 73. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. And so the Secretariat proposes some scenarios given the various constraints we have and continue to face regarding future meeting planning. I'd like to underline one or two points where I seek the guidance of the Standing Committee in particular. I fully understand, and based on our previous conversation, continue to understand that where possible, fully inclusive face-to-face meetings are the preference. However, we continue to live in uncertain times, and so there's a number of factors, including finding a host, that create a certain amount of uncertainty. So I do ask the committee to take special note of the table of tasks. You can see the daunting mandate that was given to this committee by the COP. If the situation continues such that our ability to meet face-to-face is hindered and we need to address our agenda using a virtual platform, again, like this one, we will be challenged to address all of those issues. So over the time period between now and when we need to make a final decision, I would also ask the Standing Committee to turn their attention to these tasks, to consider key priorities, to consider those issues that need to be advanced regardless of platform, and those issues that may, if necessary, be deferred and taken up after the COP. This is not something I need your immediate input on, but I do want to put this into your minds as we start planning for various scenarios depending on how the global situation evolves. And also, I do underline the point C in the recommendations of making draft working documents available for advance comment. I hope you found the documents that the Secretariat had provided and the comments that you could provide. I hope you found that process as useful as I did. So I will be turning for your insights and comments, starting with members of the Standing Committee. Although I do note that I have a request from the floor from France. So I wonder if France, while I wait for Standing Committee members to identify themselves, I wonder if France would like to take the floor.
Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Oui, très bien, merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I simply wished to say the following. France had proposed to host the Plants and Animal Committee meetings. However, under current circumstances, that is simply not going to be possible. I wish to inform the Standing Committee and other parties that France is prepared to consider hosting Standing Committee 74 in January of next year. We are certainly prepared to look into this matter as soon as we have all the information we need about technical and financial considerations. So we'll wait to hear from the Secretariat on that. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you very much, France. I am sure the members of the committee, as do I, greatly appreciate your offer to look into those possibilities. And I look forward to your liaising with the Secretariat to determine if indeed we may, if the stars align, be able to meet in France in 2022. So I will now turn to comments from members of the committee. I will start with Israel, followed by Peru.
Really acknowledge the work of the Secretariat in putting this document together, which really helps understand the situation in terms of the options. And we agree very much with the options as were presented by the Secretary General, that option 2 for a face-to-face meeting in late 21 or early 22 would be the best option. And certainly we're pleased to hear from France that they're considering seriously hosting such a meeting. As a second choice, in the idea of a virtual meeting later in 2022 is certainly not preferable, but I think that would be the second choice. We should take note that the Animals Committee and Plants Committee, for example, are going to be meeting next month virtually, but they're spreading the meeting out over a relatively long period of time so that the meetings aren't one day after the other in very concentrated and tiring form. So if indeed there is going to be the second option of a virtual meeting sometime in early 2022, then that's the way of running it, of spreading it out, maybe using different time zones over the course of the meeting, is a way of achieving the whole work package, which is certainly very large. And then as a third choice in the order of preference certainly would be scenario 1 of the face-to-face meeting in September, which we acknowledge, just like the Secretary General said, is not, looks like it's not going to be a viable option at this time. Thank you, Secretary. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Israel, and indeed, thank you for your comments on the modalities of a possible virtual meeting if it comes to that point. That is very helpful to me as I work with the Secretariat to plan. So I have Peru, followed by New Zealand, Poland, Canada, China. So Peru, please.
Gracias y buenos días, señora presidenta. Como región.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As speaking for my region, I would like to address the Secretariat's proposals with respect to Standing Committee 74. We would go with option 3, that is, that the meeting be held in an online format in early 2022. We would like to have the meeting take place online at the end of January of next year. We say this because it is our feeling that that is simply going to be a necessity. Thank you.
Thank you, Peru. So next I had New Zealand, followed by Poland, Canada, and China, and then Bahamas. So New Zealand, please, you have the floor.
Thank you. We thank the Secretariat for developing these scenarios for holding Standing Committee 74 and recognise it's very challenging at the moment with in this current time of uncertainty. I also note that the meeting sequencing is more complex without having firm COP dates, which would enable a fuller understanding of the implications for working group and document submission timeframes. We agree with the Secretariat that scenario 1 is a higher risk option due to current global health situations. But we do note that both scenarios 2 and 3 may involve a meeting in very early 2022. And while we really appreciate France's offer for possibly hosting a meeting in January 2022, we do note 2 implications of holding a meeting at that point in time. Firstly, if the COP is in mid-2022, the document submission date for that meeting is the 9th of February, so it's incredibly tight for Standing Committee to be in January and documents to then be completed by the 9th of February timeframe. And I also note another implication of a January meeting for us in the Southern Hemisphere is that that is our time of summer holidays, and it might be very difficult for some parties to either attend a meeting then or to prepare documents just at that point in time. So our preference for Standing Committee 74 at this point in time would be for a meeting in late 2021, and that could be a virtual meeting which isn't covered in the scenarios as they're set out at the time, or if the COP was in the second half of 2022, as has been indicated could happen, then Standing Committee 74 just slightly later in 2022 would be ideal. But yeah, there's just a few implications of a very early 2022 meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, New Zealand, for pointing out some of those implications to take into consideration. I had Poland next, followed by Canada, and then China.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would like to thank the Secretariat for its extensive work on the topic. We agree that scenario 1 should be discarded due to the risks involved. We believe that experience gathered in organizing this meeting, together with analysis of possible available venues, will have a valuable input to scenarios 2 and 3, which will allow us to make informed decisions basing on these 2 scenarios. We also thank for good organization of the present meeting, which allows us to advance our work. But we see also some areas for further consideration should we have other virtual meetings. One of these is exploring possibilities of having in-session working groups, as we feel that some of the items may be prolonged in intersessional processes. For example, we could analyze if it is possible to have some extra time during the meetings, be it extra day or extra session dedicated for breakout groups. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Poland. Yes, and indeed that is a lesson learned from this experience. So I have Canada, followed by China and the Bahamas, please. At this point, I will also invite parties, observer parties who wish to speak to identify themselves. Canada, please. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. The North American region thanks the Secretariat for preparing these options and appreciates that we are currently working under extreme circumstances and challenges created by this pandemic situation. I'm sure also that I can speak on behalf of the region in thanking France for its offer to potentially host the next meeting of the Standing Committee. Appreciate the comments made by New Zealand on the potential challenges as well. So we look forward to the Secretariat thoroughly analyzing that scenario. The North American region continues to prefer having face-to-face meetings, which amongst other things, such as increased participation by parties and observers, allow for those important human connections to be made. As such, we consider that scenario 2 provides the most appealing option, but we do recognize that scenario 3 could serve as a contingency plan to ensure progress is not stalled should the effects of the pandemic continue to prevent travel or large gatherings. Mindful of the large workload of the committee, the region highlights the importance to prioritize the work, as it was mentioned by the chair earlier today. If only a virtual meeting is feasible between now and COP19, the region suggests that lesser priority items or sensitive issues be deferred to the next intersessional period following COP19. We look forward to contributing to prioritizing the work of the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada. So next on my list was China, followed by the Bahamas. China, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. China appreciates the great work done by the Secretariat on analyzing and providing different scenarios for the Standing Committee and parties to take into consideration. About all the modalities, China holds the view that a face-to-face Standing Committee meeting is the most efficient, most substantial, and most comprehensive one for achieving the best goals of the Standing Committee. So whether it's late 2021 or early 2022, it's the top priority to hold a face-to-face meeting. This kind of priority is based on that more and more countries has made the pandemic under control. And the development and the dissemination of vaccine is more and more popular to more countries and more people. So we are optimistic that a face-to-face meeting will be held, no matter in Switzerland or France or in any other countries. So we also appreciate the kind offer by Switzerland and France. Thank you very much.
Thank you, China. I have the Bahamas. The Bahamas will be followed by Maroc. And at this time, I'll invite also both parties and organizations who wish to speak to request the floor so that I can determine the scope of my list and make plans accordingly. So Bahamas, please, you have the floor.
All right, good day, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. With many countries going into their third wave, scenario 1, as been mentioned, can be disregarded. Scenario 2 seems like the most viable option given the information from France and the offer to host. Inputs are really aligned with Israel, Canada, and China in that face-to-face, it allows for more human interaction and could definitely get through the points in a more efficient manner. If that cannot be an option, then scenario 3 is for sure guaranteed, and we can learn from previous online meetings and try to get better, but we have to adapt to the ever-changing circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you, Bahamas. And I see I have Morocco and Congo, which will bring us to having insights from all of the committee members from all the regions, I mean. So Morocco, please, you have the floor, and that will be followed by Congo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would be in favor of a face-to-face meeting in early 2022. Face-to-face meetings are much more effective. However, if that is not going to be possible, we should then look at the possibilities for an online meeting. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Morocco. I see some good congruence amongst the members of the committee. So Congo, please, you have the floor. We seem to have a challenge with Congo's connection. I see, Congo, you also put a comment in the messages, so perhaps I could read that out in lieu of your taking the floor, since there seems to be a technical problem. So, la République du Congo est la seule région.
The DRC and the African region welcome France's offer to host SC74. That would be in January of 2022. We would also be in favor of a face-to-face meeting, which would be our preference over an online one. This in the light of how the pandemic evolves.
Congo, for your comments. So I'll now turn to the remaining countries on my list. I have some good advice here from the countries and representatives of the Standing Committee. So I hope we can be brief, as we are really quite running out of time, and I am hoping to not have to start limiting the time for speakers. So if your views have already been presented by one of the previous speakers, I would respectfully ask if you could consider removing yourself from the list. In the interim, I have first a request from Senegal, followed by Niger, Gabon, and Kenya. Senegal,
Yeah.
please go ahead.
The speaker asks if he can be heard. Thank you. I simply wish to thank the Secretariat for the document and options outlined, and the positions outlined by the chair of the Standing Committee. I would agree with those who have said that option 1 does not seem to be a possibility. 2 and 3 should be considered, and we would like to thank France for the invitation extended. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Senegal. So next I had Niger, and Niger will be followed by Gabon.
Madame la Présidente, nous remercions la France pour...
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would like to thank France for the invitation offered to host SC 74. It is important to recall, Madam, that we in Africa have not had any guaranteed access to any vaccine against COVID-19. That does make it very difficult for us to envisage any face-to-face meetings in the near future. We think it should be borne in mind, and we should wait until all countries have access to the vaccine. We would therefore invite the Standing Committee to consider options 2 or 3 and to think carefully about an online meeting. This is a matter that concerns SC 74 as well as the COP. We need to think hard about online meetings until all parties and all countries have had access to vaccines, allowing them to attend meetings in person. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Niger. Again, I had Gabon, and I will follow by Kenya, and then I think I hope to move on. Gabon, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was tempted to withdraw my request for the floor, but I wish to address the meeting because I really wanted to thank the Secretariat for the excellent work done. It's no mean feat to look at all these options and provide a summary of the situation. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank France for extending an invitation to host SC 74. I also wanted to add that we would tend to favor option 2, that is to say face-to-face meetings. I've already had the opportunity to outline the advantages of such meetings when document 15 was under discussion. I would also like to add that we should have face-to-face meetings, but only if African countries do not face constraints raised by Niger and Senegal, constraints which have to do with our not having access to vaccines. I hope I've not taken too much time. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Gabon. And I will turn now to Kenya.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, Kenya remain convinced that a physical meeting will be the most preferable to enable the engagement of parties, particularly where we have issues of language like in the Africa region. But given the current situation, we want to align ourselves with the option 2 and want to thank France for offering to host. Madam Chair, we also agree with the Secretariat suggestion that we have these sessions in a longer period other than the current situation where the timing is short, and also the proposal that has been made to provide for the inter-sessional working group engagement. Madam Chair, in our region, most focal points for CITES also are focal points for other multilateral agreements. We'll want to urge the Secretariat, while preparing meeting sessions, to consider the running sessions. Like for now, we have a UA session going on. It's been a huge challenge for some of us to actively participate both in the concurrent treaties as well as the Standing Committee. So in trying to see, and given what was expressed before, that we still have a challenge of vaccine, and we do not see the possibility of having physical meetings, participating in physical meetings, that while trying to set up the new dates, we take cognizance of the organization of other treaties, because in our region, focal points in Ramsar, in Iowa, are the same focal points in CITES, so that we are able to actively participate. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Kenya, and I do take your points about being mindful of the international calendar when planning meetings. So I will take final 2 interventions. I trust they will be brief. It is really not my hope that I will have to start limiting speakers and time, as it is very important for me to try to get to everyone, but I do ask you to also consider, if your points have already been raised, whether you need to take the floor. So my final speakers are Sudan, and then Sudan will be followed by, I'm assuming, SSN, William Travers. So Sudan, please.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. The technicians are asking Sudan to unplug their headset to see if that works.
Okay, Sudan. Yeah, we are unable
Please
to hear you. So let's try without the headset and see if that's functional.
We still cannot hear you. I'm sorry, Sudan. Perhaps
So
if you look
Sudan,
at the
I'll invite you
settings.
to engage with the technicians in the technical chat to see if we can sort out your settings. In the interim, I'll take the final intervention from William Travers, and I'd ask you to please identify your organization. And as a reminder, when you sign on to the meetings, to please identify your organizations. So can I please ask that the floor be passed to William Travers?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, I am speaking on behalf of the Species Survival Network and 15 organizations. I won't go through them. I will simply put those into the written submission. We would like to thank the Secretariat for this important document. Clearly, our challenges, as we've just seen with our friends and colleagues from Sudan, are ongoing and difficult. Madam Chair, our organizations recognize the strong record of transparency and participation upheld and championed by CITES bodies, including the Standing Committee. We encourage the committee to maintain these standards as we determine the best way for the committee to carry out its business going forward from this pandemic and during this pandemic. We hope that the committee will continue to guarantee the ability of observers to engage in the workings of this committee, as we all, I think, benefit from the widest levels of participation. We recognize that if face-to-face meetings are not possible, time for discussion and debate might well be limited. So we encourage the committee to use all means necessary to ensure that opportunities for participation in decision-making are retained, including in regard to informal meetings, in-session working groups, as has been discussed, intersessional working groups, preparation of working documents, and other procedures that are not open to all parties and accredited observers. Thank you very much for that opportunity, Madam Chair.
Thank you, SSN. I do not know if we have resolved the concerns with Sudan's connection. I'm happy to see if you want to take the floor again, Sudan. It looks like the problem remains. We cannot hear you. Okay, apologies, Sudan. It does not seem that we can hear you, so I will again ask you to engage. If it's not possible for the problem to be fixed, if the Secretariat could mind the chat and alert me, and I can always read Sudan's intervention into our record. I wanted to close this agenda item, but I do see a final request from France, and I wonder if France has more information for us. So I will take the request from France, please. France, you have the floor. Oh dear, it seems like we are experiencing some other issues, as I do not see France coming onto the screen, although they have been accepted. Okay, so it seems that there's some technical issues to be resolved, for which I greatly apologize to both Sudan and France. I hope you are able to engage with the technicians. I don't know if it's a question of refreshing or checking permissions. I do recognize that our colleagues from France did speak beforehand, so it seems to be a new issue. I would ask if Axel and Cameron could please work directly with those countries so that we can ensure that we hear their final comments on this matter. So in the interim, the Standing Committee has provided good advice to the Secretariat and to myself about planning for our next meeting. There's a preference for option 2 of the face-to-face under the circumstances where it is possible that all participants are able to attend, and that there is support for using a virtual platform if a face-to-face meeting is not possible. I appreciate the advice provided on ways of organizing such a virtual session to ensure we have good participation. And so that's all taken into account as we note the document and agree with the recommendations. I will return to France and to Sudan later once we see if this has been resolved. So I will leave those 2 interventions pending. But in the interim, perhaps we can turn our attention to the next item on the agenda, So as was posted on the website, I would now like to turn our attention to agenda item 24 on tortoises and freshwater turtles. I would take both documents 24.1 and 24.2 together. 24.2 is a document submitted by Madagascar providing a report, and then 24.1 provides the further recommendations from the Secretariat. I wonder if we would ask first Madagascar to present their report. I'm just checking. And then turn to the Secretariat. Madagascar, please, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, on behalf of the Government of Madagascar, I'd like to thank the CITES Secretariat for organising this online meeting. We'd also like to thank the Standing Committee for having considered the report of Madagascar on the implementation of Resolution Conf 11.9 Rev Cop 18. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, we'd like to recall that our Constitution gives importance to fauna and flora and the biodiversity of Madagascar. This richness brings many people to it, and it can then lead to the trafficking of wildlife, and this has continued during the health crisis. And this puts in danger the survival of certain species such as the radiated tortoise. And the interpreter apologizes, the sound is lost. The government has, since the beginning of 2020, applied a zero tolerance to any endangering of animals. And we are working on centralizing the work, and we're working against corruption and working for good governance. And we have mixed brigades to carry out controls, and we also had some police who have been imprisoned for involvement in trafficking of tortoises. We seized 26,000, more than 26,000 by the beginning of 2021, and we have also arrested others, including 2 European citizens. We are using all forms of media and meetings with local communities to try and spread the message and increase public awareness of the problems related to traffic. We are working in partnership to have a monitoring and follow-up of the cases so that we can better understand what is taking place with trafficking. We are working on other initiatives such as village patrols and more explanations of the law, and sharing texts on trafficking with judges and other court employees, and also training more for the police and strengthening our national and international cooperation, in particular with neighboring countries. Ladies and gentlemen, the socio-economic context in Madagascar means that the country faces many challenges, and our main challenge is to maintain all the wildlife species in their natural habitat, in particular tortoises. And for us, we mustn't forget that the major driver of illegal trade is international demand. The management authorities of destination and transit countries should assist Madagascar to bring an end to this trafficking. And I'd like to thank the Secretariat and all our partners for their assistance on the work in the conservation of tortoises and freshwater turtles. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency, for your report. I will now ask the Secretariat to please introduce their document, 24.1. So, Secretariat, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, pursuant to Decision 18.286, Madagascar submitted a report to the Secretariat on 30 June 2020 on its implementation of Resolution Conf 11.9 Rev Cop 18 and the measures it has taken to combat illegal trade in tortoises and freshwater turtles. This report is available as document SC 73 Doc 24.2. which was just presented now by the Minister of Environment of Madagascar. The present document provides a summary of Madagascar's report and contains the observations of the Secretariat regarding the report. It also contains the recommendations prepared by the Secretariat for consideration by the Committee in its implementation of Decision 18.287. The Secretariat in the document it prepared notes some positive work and developments in Madagascar concerning efforts and opportunities to combat illegal trade in tortoises and freshwater turtles as it affects the party. However, the Secretariat also notes that areas for improvement remains, and that there is a need for further strengthened efforts and a continued strong and vigilant response to the poaching and illegal trade affecting the species. The recommendations prepared by the Secretariat for consideration by the Committee are presented in paragraph 16 of the present document. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. France, I do see you have returned. At this point, I think I will continue with document 24. And once we conclude the issues regarding tortoise and freshwater turtles, I will turn back to France and Sudan to hear your final comments regarding Doc 15. So so if your request for the floor is related to the previous agenda item, rest assured, France, I will be turning back to you once we conclude this item. So we have before us a report from Madagascar regarding the implementation of Resolution Conf 11.9 and some additional reactions from the Secretariat in response to decisions 18.287, and those recommendations to the Standing Committee are found in paragraph 16 of the document. So I look forward to the comments, starting with members of the Standing Committee, please. And as always, if there is silence, I will presume a general agreement with the proposals from the Secretariat. So I open the floor to members of the Standing Committee and also invite observer parties who wish to comment to please indicate. I see the United States, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The United States notes Madagascar's report in document SC 73, Doc 24.2, and commends it for submitting the report despite ongoing COVID-19 challenges. We also thank the Secretariat for developing recommendations in document 24.1 based on its review of Madagascar's progress in implementing Resolution Conf 11.9 Rev Cop 18. We support adoption of the Secretariat's recommendations with some additions. Madagascar's report was submitted in June 2020 and is now nearly a year out of date. Furthermore, Madagascar reported in its document that it was unable to provide a complete report because of ongoing challenges associated with the COVID-19 pandemic and other CITES priorities. Therefore, although we recognize that Decision 18.286 calls only for a report to SC 73, we think that it would be appropriate for the Standing Committee to request further reports from both Madagascar and the Secretariat to its 74th meeting that update the information and analysis, specifically considering the observations of the Secretariat in document 24.1 and the following additional elements. Recognizing the importance of prosecutions and the imposition of deterrent sentences in combating wildlife trafficking, we believe that it would be helpful to have additional information on prosecutions and outcomes included in any updated report. Also noting that the Secretariat, based on its review of open source information, believes that Madagascar has missed a number of recent cases. In its report, Madagascar emphasized the importance of the DINA, a traditional convention for addressing serious issues at the community level, as an important tool in addressing turtle and tortoise poaching and trafficking. Madagascar also noted that implementation of the DINA remains a challenge, and it would be helpful to know how Madagascar is addressing those challenges. We also think it would be useful for Madagascar to update on the cooperation with traffic, to better understand the network of illegal trade from Madagascar to Southeast Asia. And finally, we think it would be helpful for this committee's consideration to provide progress on implementation of the Jeff 7 project on poaching of and illegal trade in radiated tortoises, and any other relevant recently initiated projects. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, United States. The United States is asking for an additional report at the next meeting as a new recommendation. So I will also invite standing committee members to reflect on that suggestion and indicate any reactions you may have. And indeed, I would invite the same from Madagascar. I continue to invite parties who wish to speak, and I will also open the floor up to observers. I see France has requested the floor, so I'll turn the microphone to France, please. Looks like we continue to have a challenge with France's ability to take the floor, which is of concern. I don't know if the technicians are able to directly interact with France to try to address this problem. I'm mindful that I do want to be able to hear from parties who wish to speak.
Madam Chair, the technicians are working with France right now.
Okay.
So perhaps.
Okay, well, in the meantime, I will continue with my list. I only have 2 more requests to speak from observers, so I will draw some conclusions after those 2 interventions. I do note the comment from the United States, and so I will see what if there's any reactions to that. If I see silence, I will presume that parties are comfortable requesting Madagascar to provide an update on their progress at the next meeting, as proposed by the United States. So I will first turn to HSI, Ron Ornstein, and then that will be followed by Jonathan Barsdow. So HSI, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am making this intervention on behalf of 10 organizations. I will post the full list to the chat. I am going to only read a small part of our intervention. We'll post the entire thing. We basically agree with the position taken by the United States. We urge the Standing Committee to recommend that Decision 18.287 be renewed and amended to direct Madagascar to address the additional issues raised by the Secretariat and report on progress to a future meeting of the committee, whether it's SC 74 or a later one. We also recommend that Madagascar immediately establish a zero quota for harvest of and trade in wild-caught specimens of Erimnacheles madagascariensis, which is critically endangered and is the only Madagascar endemic tortoise still allowed in trade. Thank you, Madam Chair, and as I said, we will post the entire intervention on the chat.
Thank you, HSI. I had previously a request from Jonathan Barsdow that seems to have disappeared. So I will presume that his points have been raised. I understand we continue to work with France to try to ensure we can hear their intervention. Okay. So in the interim, my conclusion thus far is that the Standing Committee agrees with the recommendations found in paragraph 16 of the document. And further, there is a further recommendation that to request the Secretariat and Madagascar to report on their progress, and in particular on some of the points that were identified in discussion at the next opportunity, at the next meeting of the Standing Committee. So unless I see a request from the floor from the Standing Committee opposed to that additional request, I will include it on as an additional recommendation from the committee. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I was waiting to see if Madagascar would have a reaction to the recommendations of the United States. Canada would appreciate hearing mindful of the ongoing conditions of the pandemic. So the report was updated for 2020. We have been in a pandemic situation since then. So while we appreciate the need for having updated information and appreciate the recommendations made by the United States, I was hoping to hear the ability that Madagascar foresees in carrying out these tasks given the ongoing conditions before I can provide some advice. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada. And indeed, I do see a request from the floor from Madagascar. So Madagascar, you have the floor. There is a request from a party to have a further report at the next meeting of the committee. And so we seek your views on the feasibility of this. Thank you, Madagascar.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente, et je remercie.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank the states for having spoken. I'd like to mention the fact that it was highlighted that we are in a very complex situation in Madagascar because of the coronavirus. Nevertheless, if it's necessary to bring further information forward, we can do so, and in particular in terms of the legal proceedings and our work on collaboration with the justice system, but also we can provide figures on the work that's being carried out with various partners. I'd like to highlight one comment that was made on the fact that in Madagascar we still authorize the trade in tortoises. I reject that comment. To the contrary, the government from 2021 has continued to ban and to spare no efforts on preventing such, and that is in the The interpreter cannot hear the speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Madagascar, for your clarifications. So I understand from your comments that there are, of course, ongoing challenges in your country, as indeed globally, but that there are some key areas where you would be able to provide further information in response to the comments from the United States. And so perhaps, so I take from your intervention that you are agreeable to providing a report on those areas to the next meeting of the committee. So maybe then perhaps what we'll do is we'll request the Secretariat at Madagascar to report on their progress to the next meeting, and in particular those points that Madagascar identified that they can provide further information on. So I'm going to take a pause to see if there's any reactions, but if not, I will conclude that the Standing Committee adopts the recommendations presented by the Secretariat, and additionally kindly requests the Secretariat and Madagascar to report on progress on the information gaps that were identified in the discussion. Okay, so I do not see requests for the floor on this, so I will take that as agreed. Thank you very much, Madagascar, for your time and for agreeing to provide some additional information. Before I turn back to our agenda as it was planned, so our next item will be purpose codes, but I will take a pause to see if we have resolved the concerns with France and with Sudan so that we may hear their points regarding agenda item 15 on future planning. I mean, agenda item 28 on future planning. Ooh, I'm getting tired. France, if you wish to take the floor, or Sudan, please make a request. And again, if you have ongoing issues, I'm happy to return to this after the next item as well. Okay, so I don't see requests for the floor, so I will continue on our agenda. Mindful we only have an hour left, so some contingency planning may be needed. And I will start by turning to the chair of the Purpose Code Working Group to please introduce her document. So Australia, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Australia is pleased to chair the Standing Committee Intersessional Working Group on Purpose of Transaction Codes. I would like to thank the working group members for their participation and engagement so far, and thank the Secretariat for their support. The Standing Committee has been directed to re-establish the working group to focus on defining purpose of transaction codes to encourage their consistent use, and to consider whether any code should be eliminated or added. We have also been asked to clarify the overlap between codes that describe physical locations and those that describe activities. The working group has focused most of its discussion on defining codes that are presently undefined. The group, through a prioritisation exercise outlined in paragraph 10, agreed to focus on defining 7 codes, which are listed in paragraph 11 of the document. The meeting document presents in Annex 1 the draft definitions of those 7 codes, which the working group has arrived at so far. Paragraphs 15 to 22 outline the working group's discussions in arriving at those draft definitions, and in the interests of time, I won't go through them in detail. Annex 2 of the meeting document presents those draft amendments to Resolution 12.3 that accommodate those definitions and provide further guidance on the selection of the appropriate code. The meeting document also outlines other matters that have arisen during our discussions for consideration by the Standing Committee. We expect to work further on the draft definitions and amendments to the resolution, and will work with the Secretariat to identify any other resolutions that may be affected by our recommendations.
We welcome the views of the committee, observer parties and observers, and we look forward to continuing our discussions and reporting to the 74th meeting of the Standing Committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Australia. So Australia, as chair of the Intersessional Working Group on Purpose Codes, has provided us with a report on their progress and is looking for some signals check from the committee in terms of the activities that they've undertaken, noting that the working group is still continuing its deliberations. So with that, I will see if there's any comments or direction or advice, firstly from standing committee members to provide to this working group. I see two requests for the floor from standing committee members, and I will start then with Israel, followed by Peru, and then Indonesia. So Israel, please.
Work, and it's excellent work on definitions of the purpose codes. We have a comment on paragraph 12 of the report, where the chair of the working group notes that the group did not identify any new codes that warranted inclusion. Israel would request that the working group should consider including one new purpose code. And this is due to the emphasis in the world on zoonotic diseases and the international trade in wild meat or bush meat, which poses a serious danger for zoonotic diseases. We feel a new purpose code may be necessary in cases where the purpose of the transaction is for food, perhaps using the letter F. The reason we are proposing this code is in line with my colleague's previous comment on the issue of the WHO, OIE, and UNEP document of 12 April 2021 with guidelines. CITES has the mechanism in place to regulate international trade in wild meat or bush meat, and therefore we feel that this permit mechanism can be used and should be used with a specific purpose code for food to assist in this global effort. We would propose, therefore, for the working group to look into this issue of a new purpose code for food and to include it in its report at the next working group. Thank you.
Thank you, Israel. Next on my list, I had Peru, and Peru will be followed by Indonesia and then Canada.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With respect to the purpose code commercial T, we think that trade should be covered also, and that is the transaction that uses code C. The interpreter apologizes, the speaker was not very easy to hear.
Thank you, Peru. Next on my list, I had Indonesia, who will be followed by Canada, and then Belgium. Indonesia, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Indonesia thanks the Intersessional Working Group on Purpose of Transaction for sharing its current progress. Indonesia is of the view that the working group should continue its work to complete definition of all purpose codes. We fully understand that the logic behind the group's decision to categorize the remaining undefined codes into 3 groups. Having said that, we believe that to be proposed to COP19. Ideally, Annex 1 and Annex 2 of this document should completely cover definition of all purpose codes, including alphabet such as G, Q, S, H, and B, which have not been explained yet in this document. Thank you.
Thank you, Indonesia, for your advice to the working group. I will now take the intervention from Canada, followed by Belgium. And at this point, I will also invite observer parties who wish to speak to start identifying themselves. So Canada, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. La région de l'Amérique du Nord.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The North American region would like to congratulate the working group on the document and its annexes. We do have some comments on definitions in Annex 1, and we will take the opportunity to provide those comments at a future meeting of the working group. We would agree that parties would benefit from a separate resolution on zoos, which would not be covered by Decision 12.3. We also agree that we need to look more at the whole question of species covered by Appendix 1 of the CITES. We need to understand the type of trade involving these Appendix 1 species and to see when they are necessary and to ensure that they do not cause any threat to the survival of the species in question. We are happy to continue working with the group on these issues. We would suggest that the working group consider an implementation system for parties so that they can understand when all of these interpretations will be available, because parties will have to, in some cases, completely change their approach, and it might be difficult for the issuance of certificates if there are changes of definition in the course of the year. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Canada. My next speaker will be Belgium, and that will be followed by Gabon, Brazil, and Thailand. So Belgium, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We also want to thank the working group for their report and the work that they've done, and we want to congratulate them with their progress, as we are aware that the working group has been established a long time ago, and we want to give some input so they can resume their work. We support the changes to the definitions T, M, E, and L, but however, we suggest some changes to the code Z, N, and P. For code Z, we would like to insert rescue center, and then the sentence would read, for the purpose of movement of a specimen to a zoo, comma, aquarium, or rescue center. For code N, we would propose to delete the reference to indigenous range. If the group feels that there is still some language needed on the range, then we would prefer to use natural and or historical range, as this is existing language. For purpose code P, it seems a bit premature to us to already accept this definition, as it may be too strict, as it doesn't allow any commercial use after movement, which may not be in line with the normal treatment, notably of Appendix 2 specimens. And so we request the working group to consider this further. In any case, we want to make it clear that we feel, and although it is not mentioned in the definition now, that for purpose code P, the specimen should not necessarily be accompanied by the owner of the specimen. And lastly, we want to mention that we still want to participate in the group, and we look forward further to working with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Belgium. And so I have 3 countries who have requested the floor, and I will also open the floor to organizations who wish to speak so that I can close my list. So I have Gabon. Gabon will be followed by Brazil and Thailand. Gabon, please, you have the floor.
Vous m'entendez? OK. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. Gabon would encourage would recommend changes to the code, the definition proposed for tea, including items that will lead to an economic benefit. We think that economic issues should be taken into account when permits are issued. We feel that tea code should be applied when African elephants are to be exchanged. We also strongly support the new para 4 of the resolution on permits and certificates, where the non-commercial aspects are not clear enough, or the purpose is not clear enough. This provides for significant clarification when it comes to taking decisions when there are different purposes involved. We would also like to see a text 412.3 Rev Cop 18, some new language on the Z code, which would be submitted to COP.
Thank you, Gabon. I am now going to close my list with the following speakers. So I have Brazil. Brazil will be followed by Thailand, Yemen, and then I will turn to SSN and AZA, and those will be my final interventions. So Brazil, please, you have the floor.
Can you hear me? Okay, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. We have two comments on this document. The first one regarding Code L. Brazil still issues permits under court order for some of its most valuable timbers, such as mahogany, rosewood, and Brazil wood. Besides using such code to identify these permits, we make reference in the document to the fact that it was issued under court order. In Brazil, we use the code L so that it can be identified in the CITES annual report as the additional information we insert in the permit in the open box field for writing does not appear in the format of the annual report. We therefore believe it is important to differentiate between the permit issued under court order and the one whose issuance is not judicially ordered. So we suggest the following draft definition for Code L. Purpose Code L, then between brackets, law enforcement / judicial / forensic, should be used where the transaction is for the purpose of transfer of specimens between or in support of government agencies for law enforcement, judicial, or forensic purposes. And then comes our proposal, or if the permit is issued under court order. As for Code P, Brazil suggests deleting the final part of the draft definition, the one that reads, quote, only in accordance with Resolution Conf 10.20, unquote. This is because that part implies that only the certificate of ownership issued by a CITES authority should be accepted for the cross-border transport of pets, which is not true. CITES export and import permits can be used for this purpose, and Code P must be used in them. The difference is that the normal CITES export permit is only valid for one operation, whereas the certificate of ownership is valid for many, albeit for a limited period. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. My next speaker is Thailand. Thailand will be followed by Yemen, and then I will turn to the two observers. So Thailand, please.
For commercial on pet trade of live animal in Appendix 1. But Thailand would like to the working group please consider about moving the living plant in Appendix 1 also. When someone wants to move their collection of living plants, especially the plants in Appendix 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Thailand. I will now turn to Yemen, and that will be followed by SSN and then AZA. So Yemen, please, you have the floor. So we appear to have continued challenges with Yemen. So again, I'll ask you to interface with the technicians. And if it's not possible, I will seek for you to put your intervention in the messaging, and I will try to read it into the record. In the interim, I will turn to my final two speakers. So I have SSN, please, and that will be followed by AZA. So SSN, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This intervention is on behalf of 12 organizations, including the Species Survival Network. We strongly encourage the Standing Committee to recommend changes to the proposed definition of Purpose Code T in order to include, quote, any activity reasonably likely to result in economic use, gain, or benefit, unquote. We also recommend that the Standing Committee agree to pursue a resolution for consideration and adoption at COP19 regarding the use of the Z code. Such a resolution could include recommendations that assist parties in distinguishing between transactions and shipments that have a conservation purpose and those that are primarily commercial in nature. It could also encourage the adoption and implementation of clear and transparent trading practices under Purpose Code Z. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, SSN. And I will turn now to AZA, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm making this intervention on behalf of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, the European Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums. We greatly appreciate the excellent progress made by the Purpose Codes Working Group. We are particularly grateful to the Chair for her excellent guidance and management of the perennially pernicious Purpose Code problem. The group has had a particularly robust discussion around Purpose Code Z, highlighting the diverse work of zoos and aquariums, the potential for abuse of this Purpose Code, and the need to capture the many functions that good zoos and aquariums perform, such as rescue, breeding, public education, placement of confiscated wildlife, and reintroduction efforts. AZA, IAZA, and WAZA strongly support the definition of Purpose Code Z as currently drafted, and with the suggestion from Belgium, and appreciate the constructive dialogue that came to this definition. With regard to the potential for a new resolution regarding more substantive matters related to zoos and aquariums, we would note that this suggestion was made by a small number of working group members and, in our view, is outside the scope of the working group's mandate. Though we're happy to highlight the many ways that zoos and aquariums contribute to conservation of CITES listed species, we've not heard a compelling argument for a new resolution on zoos and aquariums and do not support further effort without a clear articulation of what problems such a resolution would solve. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, AZA. I don't know if we've solved the issue with Yemen, if we would like to turn to Yemen for that intervention. Okay, that does not seem to be working. I do see an intervention in the chat, and I'm trying to determine if it is indeed related to this point or is another point. Okay, so Yemen has provided an intervention in the chat. It's, I'll read it out, although I'm not entirely sure if it's related to this point, but I will read it out as Yemen has requested. In Yemen, we have a number of endangered animals, such as Nubian ibex, mountain gazelle, Arabian leopard, which are constantly subjected to killing, hunting, and trafficking. Unfortunately, however, CITES Secretariat don't have database for future research on biodiversity in our region. We want to activate the Big Cats project and preserve the sharks and sea cucumber. We also want to define projects for Nubian ibex, mountain gazelle in the Arabian Peninsula. So thank you, Yemen, for those points. I think those are points you might wish to direct to the Secretariat for discussion, as they do not seem to be related to the purpose code discussion. So I will leave it at that. Now, I do see some other requests for the floor, but I had closed my list. So I am going to move ahead, noting that what we are doing here is providing advice to the Standing Committee Working Group on purpose codes. So first of all, we take note of the progress of the working group, and in particular, we note some of the advice to the working group provided on the definitions that I understand the working group is continuing to consider, such as advice from Peru on definition T. And I understood in particular with the advice from Peru, there was a bit of a translation concern. And so I am looking, because I believe Peru also provided a bit more clarification in their commentary. But in any case, Peru had some advice on T and the use of interchange. We had a number of comments from Belgium, from Brazil on code L, code P. Canada indicated they will provide some further comments. So it is clear that there is work to continue in the working group, and I trust that the advice heard in the discussion will help that working group advance its mandate. We also take note of some of the other issues that have arisen in the margins of the discussion of the working group, including the point raised by Israel. I note that the working group has been given a mandate, and they are still working on achieving their mandate. So we can take note of some of these additional issues, and we will look to your future reports as to whether parties may wish to take up some additional issues as a decision from the COP. So with that, I think the Standing Committee can thank the working group for the progress so far, and appreciate their continued efforts to address the mandate and work on definitions of purpose codes, taking into account the points raised by the committee members and parties and observers who have provided views here. Okay, so thank you for that. My little pause there is my usual nodding of heads. So seeing no requests from the committee members, I will take that as agreed. And then again, before I turn to item 20, I will revert back to item 28, as I hope we have resolved some of the issues. So first of all, it does not appear that our country our friends from Sudan have been able to sort out their microphone issues, so I would like to read what Sudan has provided so it could be recorded. Sudan says, "Thank you, Chair. You are doing best in this extraordinary situation. We in Sudan support the cooperation with all parties and especially between countries to reduce the intersections. We have diversity in flora and fauna with good existence, but we are affected by the COVID-19 situation. So finally, we support the face-to-face meeting of the Standing Committee and the points highlighted by the African countries. So thank you, Sudan. I apologize, and I do hope that we will be able to resolve your microphone issues. So in addition to Sudan, I now see France has hopefully resolved their issues, so I will give the floor to France for their point regarding future planning. France, please, you have the floor.
Vous m'entendez?
Oui, oui, très bien.
Ah, merci Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My apologies for the technical problems. Just when we were talking about item 28, I wanted to thank the parties who welcomed France's proposal, and I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that possibly if the pandemic were to continue, we might have to be asked to limit the number of participants so that the necessary distance can be observed between participants. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, France, and that is also duly noted, and indeed one of the many aspects of trying to plan in a rather uncertain environment. So we will definitely ask the Secretariat to take that into account when we consider what our options are for the next meeting. So with France's intervention, that closes finally our discussion on item 28 as well. So now I will turn our attention to document 20 on simplified procedures. And I believe the Secretariat will provide a short introduction for this document. So Secretariat, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am pleased to introduce this long-awaited document. Already at its 12th meeting in Chile in 2002, the COP had requested the Secretariat to prepare guidance on the registration of scientific institutions. At its most recent meeting, the Conference of the Parties adopted Decision 18.171, which directed the Secretariat to prepare draft guidance on the use of the simplified procedures to issue permits and certificates, and on the use of the exemption for scientific exchange. This was in the context of the amendments made to Resolution Conf 11.15 on scientific exchange and to Resolution Conf 12.3 on permits and certificates. The amendments to the first of these two resolutions included a requirement for parties to review and update the register of scientific institutions every 5 years and to inform the Secretariat of any changes to the register. Many parties have done this or are in the process. The COP also agreed, perhaps anticipating events such as a global pandemic, that all diagnostic testing labs recognized as official reference labs or collaborating centers by the World Organization for Animal Health, or OIE, would qualify for inclusion in the CITES register. This would allow such labs to exchange reference material in CITES listed species without seeking permits each time. As mentioned, the COP also agreed to amend the simplified procedures contained in Part 13 of the Resolution on Permits and Certificates. This was mainly in response to researchers and conservation organizations that had found the simplified procedures too complicated to use in real emergency situations. The Secretariat hopes that this guidance will provide the understanding and give the confidence to parties and stakeholders to use the simplified procedures to issue permits and certificates to facilitate and expedite when there is no or negligible impact on the conservation of the species. The Secretariat has consulted with parties and stakeholders in preparing the guidance. The first draft of the guidance document was also made publicly available in the fall, and parties and stakeholders were invited to submit their comments through a notification in November last year. The Secretariat is grateful for the constructive inputs that have contributed to making the guidance relevant and practical. We welcome any further comments or feedback on the draft guidance and hope that parties and stakeholders will find it useful. I would like to note that the same decision directs the Secretariat to provide training on the use of simplified procedures if so requested and subject to external funding. So far, the Secretariat has received neither funding nor requests in this regard, but we remain available to conduct such trainings, potentially online. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat, for that report of this long-awaited document, which has also undergone an review via an online posting. So the Standing Committee is invited to provide any comments and to request the Secretariat to finalize the guidance and make it available on the website. So I'll open the floor first for members of the Standing Committee. And I'm also happy to invite comments from parties. So starting with the Standing Committee members, I have Canada, followed by Indonesia and Belgium. Canada, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The North America region welcomes the proposition from the Secretariat. This document will help with understanding of the permits for those who do not use them very often, and we'll look forward to the publication in November. And we put forward the request for comments. The comments and feedback from parties will help us to progress. We note that in paragraph 16, the parties are encouraged to register laboratories, and that the laboratories and the OIE should work together for the management to ensure that the best solutions are put into place. And in many cases, it may be better than just registering the institution. In the document, in page 3, paragraph 3, conditions is incomplete. And in the annex of our document, there is information for those who have little experience with the certification processes. And it would be very useful to have a shorter document. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. So my next intervention is from Indonesia, followed by Belgium. And any parties who wish to take the floor are invited to identify themselves. Indonesia, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Indonesia would like to thank the Secretariat for preparing guidance and on the use of the scientific exchange exemption and simplified procedure. The guidance is very useful to assist any individual and organization to better understand SEE and SP in expediting CITES specimens across the international border. We would like to make 2 points. Firstly, we expect that this draft guidance to also give explanation on its compatibility with the provision under the Nagoya Protocol. Indonesia has issued some international regulations on the exchange of the genetic resources to comply with the Nagoya Protocol. In that context, to make easier for parties, SEE and SP guidance should be aligned with the procedures and guidance that have been established under Nagoya Protocol's frameworks. Secondly, once the guidance is completed and agreed by the parties, there should be workshop or capacity building activities for management authorities so that the parties could understand and implement the guidance in comprehensive manner. We support the Secretariat to finalize the guidance. Thank you.
Thank you, Indonesia. I will now turn to Belgium, and Belgium will be followed by Thailand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We welcome the draft guidance, and it will surely be good for all the parties to use. We agree with the Secretariat that the guidance might be quite long and detailed, and therefore we support also the development of a shorter checklist that could accompany that guidance. Thank you.
Thank you, Belgium. I will turn to Thailand now, please. Thailand, you have the floor.
Thank you. On the use of simplified procedure, draft guidance from paragraph 5 for a scientific exchange in Table 1 is not required for CITES permit or certificate. Thailand agree for this, but concerned in case of the exchange for new species of plants. This exchange shall indicate that the specimen should from the legal acquisition and no controversy with national regulation. Thank you.
Thank you, Thailand. I've opened the floor to standing committee members and parties. I'll also see if there are any observers who wish to react to this. At this time, I see some good support for the document, and I think the committee is ready to agree the document. There are some comments on elements that might be provide a bit more guidance, particularly from Canada and Thailand. A call for capacity building as well, which the Secretariat identified. I note Indonesia's comments about the Nagoya Protocol. I suspect that the Secretariat is not in a position to address measures under another agreement, but I invite you to engage with the Secretariat to see within the context of the CITES mandate if there are reminders of other requirements to be brought forward. But I don't think we can ask the Secretariat to speak to the requirements of another agreement. I have a request from the League of American Orchestras. So I will take that request, and I believe that will be the last of my speakers.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to briefly comment on behalf of the League of American Orchestras, as well as 18 other stakeholders referenced in Information Document 5. We thank the Secretariat for this convening and for the preparation of Document 20. At the 16th Conference of the Parties, Resolution Comp 16.8 was adopted on frequent cross-border non-commercial movements of musical instruments, creating a multi-use musical instrument certificate with revisions adopted at COP 17. The process of issuing and credentialing these permits is extremely variable from country to country and is an urgent need of harmonization and simplified procedures in order to fully facilitate travel with musical instruments. We have been informed by individual musicians and ensembles that the required time and financial expense of obtaining and putting to use the MIC has left no option but to forego travel with their best musical instruments. Decision 18.171 includes direction for the Secretariat to include consideration of other types of specimens in addition to those identified in document COP 18, Doc 56, paragraph 13, with a focus on the international movement of CITES specimens where the trade will have a negligible impact on the species concerned. We ask that this work include review of simplified procedures for frequent cross-border non-commercial movements of musical instruments. A more detailed statement summarizing the perspective of musical instrument stakeholders is included in Information Doc 5, signed by 19 national and international organizations. We stand ready to be an ongoing resource to the parties and the Secretariat, and remain committed to educating musicians globally about how their compliance with CITES requirements will support both urgent conservation needs and essential international cultural activity. Thank you.
Thank you, League of American Orchestras. So I see no further requests from the floor. I hear lots of strong support for this document, so I conclude that the Standing Committee is ready to endorse the draft guidance presented in the annex of the document and request that the Secretariat finalize the guidance, taking into account some of the points raised in particular by perhaps Canada, Thailand, Belgium, within the context of the intent of this guidance. So I'm seeing if there's any objections, but seeing no requests for the floor, I conclude that the Standing Committee agrees with my summary and that we therefore request the Secretariat to finalize this document. So thank you to the Secretariat. So I know we have 15 minutes left in our planned agenda. So I will move to documents 21 and 22, and we will see how we go. I will start then with document 21 on stocks and stockpiles. So in the interest of time, I will provide the introduction for this document and seek the views of the committee. In particular, this decision 17.170, was directed to the Standing Committee, and it doesn't rely on another country acting. And so I first requested the Secretariat to prepare this document, providing an update of the existing provisions agreed by the parties concerning controls of stocks and stockpiles. So you will see those outlined in paragraph 7. And then the Secretariat advises that the Standing Committee may wish to consider setting up an intersessional working group to progress the implementation of this decision. And they take note of the elements of the previous intersessional working group's mandate for the consideration by the committee. So I am looking to advice from the committee on your views on how to progress this decision. And I will open the floor first to members of the committee. And I see Poland, followed by Peru.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Poland would like to thank the Secretariat for this comprehensive report and support the suggestion to establish a new working group on the subject, provided, however, that the scope of the group is reduced and well defined. The scope of the working group can cover paragraphs from A to C of the previous working group terms of reference. However, it should avoid inclusion of legal implications of sale of confiscated specimens and discussion about the management of stockpiles. And last remark, Madam Chair, while drafting a new mandate of the working group, we are open, of course, to the alternate language used to refine the scope for further discussions along the lines we've mentioned earlier. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Poland. I will turn now to Peru, followed by Canada.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. We would like to Thank you for the preparation of this document by the Secretariat, and we welcome the suggestion of establishing an intersessional working group, and we support the review of the existing provisions concerning controls on stocks of species in CITES listed species, and the work on strengthening the controls for shark specimens. And on behalf of Peru, the interpreter cannot hear the speaker. The interpreter was unable to hear the last part of the intervention.
I understand our interpreters could not hear the last part of your intervention, so I wonder if you could repeat yourself, making sure to speak clearly into the mic.
Sí, claro que sí.
Yes. What I wanted to say was that we are interested in the setting up of this, and we would be interested in participating in the group.
Thank you, Peru. Next on my list is Canada, and I'll also open the floor for interest from parties. Canada, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am speaking on behalf of the North American region. We thank the Secretariat for the preparation of this document. At this time, the region suggests that a new intersessional working group may be challenging under the current circumstances, and certainly we have witnessed that during this meeting. Given the global health crisis and the multiple working groups already in operation, some of which have not yet had the opportunity to advance their mandate. It may be preferable to note that the updated information from the Secretariat and simply suggest the COP extends its decision. In this way, the committee could turn its attention to this important issue once the pandemic is behind us. And, we can meet under more normal circumstances. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada. So I have different approaches suggested, two in favor of a working group with a tight scope, and Canada suggesting that perhaps now is not the time for a working group. So again, I'm opening the floor now to parties who wish to comment on this. So I will, I see a request from Argentina.
Gracias, señora presidenta.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank and congratulate those who drew up this document. I would just like to speak to recall what Peru said, because I think the communication was cut. We would like to indicate that the Peruvian representative stated that Argentina, Chile, and Peru would like to participate in a working group should it be set up. Thank you.
Thank you. So I do see interest in a working group from Argentina, Chile, Peru. Chile, please, you have the floor.
Gracias, señora Presidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to reiterate our intent and willingness to join a working group and to thank everyone for the production of this wonderful document.
Thank you, Chile. I will see if there's any further requests from the floor. I'll also open the floor up to observers. Based on the interventions I've heard so far, there does seem to be some interest in a working group with a reduced scope. So my inclination is to see about setting up the working group with the mandate as expressed by Poland. So this would be taking into account points A, B, and C of the previous mandate, and which I believe are the points that are aligned to the decision that was taken. Although I would also add the final point about reporting to the committee. So I see a request from the floor from the Democratic Republic of Congo. So you have the floor.
Merci, Madame, pour la parole.
Thank you for giving me the floor. The Democratic Republic of Congo would like to congratulate and thank the working group, and we'd like to join. Thank you.
Congo, so again, I do feel the interest. For people who simply want to indicate their interest in participating in the working group, I'd ask you to hold on. Right now, I am first interested in hearing if there's any disagreement with this proposed path forward to establish an intersessional working group with the mandate of reviewing the existing provisions, identifying CITES conservation and enforcement objectives, and suggesting definitions of stocks and stockpiles, and then reporting back to the committee. So I see a request from China. So China, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since stock and stockpiles is mainly a domestic issue, if any international working group is needed, a clear terms of reference is necessary, and its target should focus on preventing illegal acquired specimens from entering, or in case of stocks of confiscated specimens re-entering trade. Furthermore, the term of reference should be reported to and reviewed by 74th Standing Committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, China. I see Canada, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. As we see, there is interest in forming a new working group. The North American region would firstly like to note that the previous working group was not able to achieve consensus in a range of areas, and that at COP, the Standing Committee commented that future work should have a more defined scope that excludes discussions regarding management of stockpiles. We would support the proposal from, I believe it was colleagues from Poland, on having focused terms of reference on items A, B, and C. And finally, our recommendation, as always, is that in undertaking this work, we would like to ensure that any resulting guidance clearly respects the scope of CITES. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Canada. So I think we're coming to conclusion on this with the formation of a working group with that reduced mandate as described by Poland and Canada. I have 2 requests that I will take, and then I will close on this point so that I can see interest in the working group. So I see first Zimbabwe and then Niger. Zimbabwe, please.
Thank you, Chair. Zimbabwe wishes to align itself with comments that were made by Poland and Canada, and I think it will be necessary to ensure continuity of the work and mandate of this working group with much clarity. Thank you very much, and Zimbabwe will be interested in joining. Thank you.
Thank you, Zimbabwe. And I will take my final request from Niger. I apologize to organizations, but as we have run out of time, I will be unable to take interventions from organizations. So Niger, please. Niger, I am unable to hear if you are trying to intervene. I don't know if your microphone is...
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Niger would like to participate in the working group.
So I am going to conclude this discussion. I beg the indulgence of our really delightful interpreters and the participants. I think we are going to take 15 minutes overtime so that I can conclude this and then wrap up a path forward for the remaining items of our agenda, given that we will not be able to address them. So first of all, I conclude that the Standing Committee would like to form an intersessional working group in line with Decision 17.170. The intersessional working group will be mandated to review the existing provisions agreed by parties concerning controls on stocks and specimens of CITES listed species, which are provided in this document, I believe, under paragraph 7. The working group will identify CITES conservation and enforcement objectives in the management of stocks and stockpiles, and suggest definitions of stocks and stockpiles. And then finally, the working group will be asked to report its conclusions and recommendations to the next meeting of the Standing Committee. And so we have removed any consideration of legal issues or management of piles, as was identified by the previous Standing Committee. And thus, this working group's focus will be on the points as directed to it by the Conference of the Parties. For interest in the working group, I would ask that countries and observers who wish to participate in the working group to please request the floor. I will take these requests the floor to be your interest in participating. I am going to call out the countries. Once I call out the countries, please remove yourself from the list, and after which I will call out observers. So I have the United States, Argentina, the UK, Israel, Vietnam, Singapore, Zimbabwe, Chile, Peru, Niger, India, China, Burkina Faso, Ethiopia, Namibia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Tanzania, Ethiopia and Namibia, I think. South Africa, Canada, Okay, I don't see any new parties, so I am now going to read out membership interests from organizations. So I have Born Free Foundation, WCS, FAO, IUCN, Lewis and Clark, EIAUS, Forest-Based Solutions, Sea Shepherds Legal, Traffic, HSI, FFI, IWPA, WWF, Oceana Inc., Defenders of Wildlife, IWMC, NRDC, ZSL, and the International Association for Wildlife Agencies. And I see an additional country, Benin. Okay, so we have 20, oh, and I now have Thailand. So we have 21 countries and 19 organizations, so that allows good participation. I have, I'm also including Kenya in this group. So that will be the formation of the working group, and I will liaise with the parties to determine a chair, and we will, as part of the record, we will include the name of the chair once we have had the opportunity to request a volunteer. So that is the 21 members of the working members of the working group and the 19 observers. So thank you very much. I will ask you all to release your request for the floor. And I will now sum up how I intend to manage the remaining documents. So first of all, with respect to document 22, so this is the report the European Union provided to the Standing Committee on the work on stocks and stockpiles of elephant ivory. First of all, I want to provide my sincere thank you to the European Union for chairing this working group. I see you put a lot of excellent effort into addressing some of these issues, which can be very challenging, and that that there was good discussion within the working group. I see that in your report you raised that there was some continuing discussion on the treatment of pulverized ivory and commercial trade. So perhaps we are unable to conclude on your recommendations at this time. I therefore would respectfully request if you could convene with your working group one last time to go through the guidance and see if there's any further corrections or details you want to provide, and then provide us back with your excellent report at the next meeting. And I do understand that your working group has put lots of effort into this, and that you have done what I understand to be an excellent job in guiding folks to consensus. I had heard from one or two countries who had some small points that they had hoped to raise regarding this guidance, and so I will be inviting them as members of the working group, I believe. Yep. To maybe engage with the working group for that one last review. Thank you so much, European Union. With respect to document 23, so this is the first opportunity we've had to see the terms of reference and modus operandi for the Big Cats Task Force. I understand there is likely a lot of comments regarding this. So given that the Secretariat has been asked to prepare this and convene the task force, I am going to ask the Secretariat to post this document, Doc 23, on the CITES website and provide for in essence, an intersessional review. I would ask parties and observers who are interested in providing comments on the proposed terms of reference and modus operandi to respond to the notification of this posting by the timeline provided by the Secretariat, so that the Secretariat can take into consideration those comments and provide revised terms of reference and modus operandi, which we will consider, which the committee can then consider at a future point. So again, I will ask the Secretariat to post this document so that the comments of parties and observers can be received, and the Secretariat can revise the document for review by the committee. Thank you. Remaining on our agenda is agenda item 25. This was a report from the Annotations Working Group. So I want to thank the Annotations Working Group for submitting their report, and I will look forward to their future work. And of course, members of the working group and parties are invited to liaise with the chair of the working group if they have any specific comments on the progress of this working group. And then finally, the document on guidance for the publication of the appendices. I will ask that that be deferred to the next meeting of the committee. So this is my intended summation of how to deal with the remaining items on our agenda, given that we have gone now over time. So with that, at this point, I think I will turn to any other business and closing remarks, noting that we are now 10 minutes over and that I am going to we are going to get kicked off this platform pretty soon. So I will see if, first of all, in any other business, and if there's any comments, again, focusing on the agenda that we've had, noting that we do not have significant new time. So Israel, please.
Briefly, Chair, we would like to bring up in any other business our proposal that we raised under agenda item 15 today, where we requested the Standing Committee request the Secretariat to issue a notification for parties to take note and to try to take note of the World Health Organization document of April 12th, which we mentioned earlier. And we would like at this point for the Standing Committee to adopt that decision directed to the Secretariat.
Thank you, Israel. I think at this point, given we do not have time to debate this proposed decision, I would instead invite the Standing Committee to take note of your comments, and we will include your point in the record under any other business. However, I think at this time we will simply take note of your comments. And again, Israel, I do invite you to raise this issue again and the substance of that concern in the discussions of the Intersessional Working Group on Zoonotics.
Okay, thank you, Chair, for taking that into account, and thank you for your excellent running of this meeting.
Thanks, Israel. We're doing what we can. Any other business from members of the Standing Committee? Okay, then with the indulgence of our delightful interpreters and platform, I think I will take 1 second to confirm. I don't have the list in front of me. Sorry, I'm getting messages, and so it's a bit overwhelming. I did want to confirm the chair of the Intersessional Working Group we established on the African Carnivores Initiatives will be Germany. So I provide my sincere thank you to Germany. I was wondering if the Secretariat could take a few minutes to quickly refresh everyone's memories on the membership of that working group. So maybe Secretariat, if you have that to hand, because I do not.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We do have that at hand. Hélène, if you could take the floor to read out the names of the countries, please, the parties and the observers.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Secretary General. Let me just scroll to the relevant agenda item, which was 14. There you go. Members of the Intersessional Working Group on the African Carnivores Initiative were agreed as follows. Argentina, Benin, Burkina Faso, China, Costa Rica, Ethiopia, Gabon, Germany as chair, Israel, Namibia, Niger, South Africa, Spain, United States of America, Yemen, and Zimbabwe. The Convention of Migratory Species, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, Born Free Foundation, Conservation Analytics, Conservation Force, European Association of Zoos and Aquaria, Humane Society International, IWMC World Conservation Trust, Pantera, Safari Club International, Safari Club International Foundation, San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance, Traffic Wildlife Conservation Society, WWF, and Zoological Society of London. Thank you.
Thank you. So that confirms the names that were agreed for the Intersessional Working Group to finalize the working program for the African Carnivores Initiative. If you feel that you requested the floor as a party and your name was missed, I would ask you to please let myself or the Secretariat know. However, and so I would ask you to let us know just via email, please, and I will, as chairs of the working groups can adapt their working groups if necessary, we can make those adaptations. And so I think that is the point that maybe Tanzania, Kenya wish to raise. But now that we are well and truly over time, I'm going to go to concluding remarks. I will be very brief myself to say that I want to thank everyone who attended for your patience in participating in this meeting. I am saddened that we were unable to complete our agenda, but I do note that I have learned some important lessons about some of the necessary adaptations you need to make for a virtual meeting that I will surely take forward if indeed it is we are required to meet in this format again. I want to extend my sincere thank you to the Secretariat for arranging this meeting. My thank you to the interpreters, who I am hearing from colleagues of all languages have done, as usual, a truly excellent job in providing an excellent interpretation. I want to thank the members of the committee, observer parties, observers for attending and providing your views in robust yet succinct ways. You have helped us get as far as we could in the agenda, and I greatly appreciate that. I appreciate that we have advanced elements of our mandate, for which I am grateful. And finally, I do want to thank the chairs of the intersessional working groups for their reports, for the work they have put in these most extraordinary times, and for the work that they will continue to do. You are indeed part of the backbone of our ability to meet our mandate. So with that, I will leave that. I will see if there's any last closing remarks, either from the Secretary General or from members of the committee, and then I think I will close the meeting. So Secretary General, did you want to close any closing remarks?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just very quickly, to let everyone know that a consolidated executive summary of the entire meeting will be circulated to the members and acting members of the committee for endorsement immediately after the meeting. The decisions taken at SC 73 will come into effect as soon as the consolidated executive summary has been endorsed by the committee. The summary record will be prepared based on paragraph 2 of Rule 19 and include further details on the discussions at the meeting. Any comments or views expressed in the chat of the meeting will not be included in the summary record unless such comments have been read into the record. The list of participants will be finalized by the Secretariat after the meeting, and all documents will be posted on the CITES website. I add my thanks to yours, to everyone, to you, Madam Chair, for chairing this online meeting, such a long one with a big agenda for so many days without a break. Much appreciated. And thanks to the interpreters and to Kudo for all their support, and in particular thanks to my staff who have been excellent and worked tirelessly to ensure that this could take off as we wanted it to take off in a very good way. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and indeed, I did forget to my thanks to Kudo and the technicians for helping us, guiding us through. So thank you, everyone. I thank you, committee members, parties, and observers. And with that, I conclude this 73rd meeting of the Standing Committee, and wish you all a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. Thank you.